Back to Wake Up America, folks. I'm Carl Higbie. People are on edge these days. Multiple mass shootings have rocked our nation just in the last week. In Pittsburgh, police are searching for multiple suspects in a shooting that killed 2 juveniles at a South Carolina mall, 12 injured, and here in New York City, 10 injured after a gunman opened fire on a crowded subway train.
It's so sad. So let's bring in the spokesperson for the National Police Association, a 29-year police veteran and current law enforcement trainer, Sergeant Betsy Bratner-Smith. Welcome back to Wake Up America, Betsy.
Hey, good morning, you guys. Happy Easter Monday.
Happy Easter Monday.
So, Sergeant, we had you on yesterday, and we talked about a lot of things. And these recent shootings, they've sparked the debate over the Second Amendment. They've also sparked the debate over the gun-free zones. And we went through the list yesterday, but if you weren't watching yesterday, which, folks, come on, you have your coffee with us on Sunday morning. The issue is the recent mall shooting in North Carolina, gun-free zone. Airbnbs, it says on their code of conduct that you should have your guns secured in there. We've seen Parkland, Columbine, the Pulse nightclub,
the Subway.
Sandy Hook, the Subway. They're all gun-free zones. Should we have more good guys with guns? Do you think that would solve the problem? Because some police officers say no.
Well, Carl, I was watching yesterday and shouting at the TV. And here's the thing. When we talk about gun-free zones, what you hear very often in the media is police leadership saying, oh, we don't want more guns. I mean, just yesterday on a national news show, Eric Adams was parroting Joe Biden and saying, oh, we need more ATF, more federal police officers, and we need to get rid of the ghost guns in New York. Ghost guns are not the problem in New York. So as John Lott famously has talked about for decades, more guns, less crime. And, you know, I live in a state where we have constitutional carry. And while our cities have crime, in other areas, we don't have the armed robberies and the carjackings that you have in New York or Chicago. You know, remember, I come from Chicago, where it's almost as difficult to own a firearm as it is in New York.
Yet skyrocketing crime.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's been that way for 30 years. So yes, actually, one of the police websites did a survey about 10 years ago, asked line level cops, what do you think about trained armed citizens? And they overwhelmingly said, we welcome them.
Well, but that's the thing too, is, and I made a wager a couple weeks ago that gun owners are more law-abiding than Democrats. I put that out, and I've asked somebody to prove me wrong. And the issue here is, look, I go through look, I have Class 3 permits, I have suppressors, I have all kinds of guns and everything. Everything I've bought with a background check, everything I go to the umpteenth level to make sure that I am completely in compliance with state, local, federal, whatever laws there are, because that is a right that I enjoy, but it's also a huge level of responsibility. Now, that said, like, if I get pulled over for speeding or whatever, you know, the first thing I do is I put my hands on the wheel and I tell the police officer, so before I reach for my license, I have a loaded weapon on my right hip, and they're like, oh, okay, no problem, and they're totally relaxed about it. So, you know, talk about the culture of gun owners and how that correlates to law-abiding citizens actually being on the lookout on behalf of police.
Well, that's one of the things that we actually talk about in our trainings, is that we encourage citizen involvement. The National Police Association put out a PSA a couple of months ago asking people to put down their phones, and if they're able to get involved in a police confrontation where the officer is getting hurt, that the police go ahead and jump in. Police officers appreciate citizens jumping in when they can. They've got to do it safely. And a police officer must know that this is a law-abiding citizens. And that's why we encourage citizens to don't just strap a gun on, get trained, go to a class, know the law, know what a police officer might need. Yeah. You know, my husband and I are both retired police officers. We carry all the time. And we pay attention to what's happening. And if we think a police officer needs help, of course, we're going to jump in. But let's look at all these crimes that, you know, the mass shootings that we've had over the weekend, the 14 shootings in Chicago. None of those are done with legal firearms. And, you know, there's these myths that people are just walking into, you know, this store, that store, or a gun show and walking out with a firearm. It's a lie. It's not true.
But the left never wants to let the truth get in the way of a good story, so they are always lying. So speaking of New York Mayor Eric Adams, who you brought up, Sergeant, take a listen to what he had to say just yesterday.
The scales right now are tipped very heavily in favor of the reforms of the progressive left. Well-intended, some needed, but tipped too far. And what we have as a result is this growing fear of crime, this growing actual amount of crime, as evidenced in almost every major American city.
Is Commissioner Bratton right?
Yes, I believe he is right. And he understood what we had to go through during the mid-'80s, early '90s, when we had to transform policing.
So we have a short time left here, but I really want you to weigh in on this. So we just heard what Eric Adams had to say. He agrees that progressive politics are playing a huge part in the crime wave. What do you think?
And yet he's playing progressive politics. He's asking people to support Build Back Better so that the Biden administration can pour money that they're going to control into law enforcement. We've been here before. We know how to stop crime in New York. And Eric Adams was there when that was going on. Let's go back to what we did in the 90s and stop it.
I had high hopes for him because he was a cop, and I thought he was going to take the right move and listen to the beat on the ground. Didn't seem like he listened. Sergeant Betsy Brantner-Smith, we appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me.